Alex had never been to a place quite like Xiphos. The planet was vibrant and full of life, its skies painted with hues of purple and orange, and its cities glittered with technology far beyond what humans had yet achieved. Part of Alex, the young explorer sent by the Earth Federation, couldn't help but be in awe of the world he had arrived in. His mission was simple: assist in peace talks between different alien factions on Xiphos. But as he walked through the streets of the capital city, it quickly became clear that this planet held secrets that no one had prepared him for. Alex wasn't sure if it was the air or the beauty of the planet, but there was an electricity in the atmosphere, a tension that seemed to hang over everything. As he stepped into the Grand Palace to meet the alien leaders, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The meeting room was grander than anything Alex had ever seen. Tall marble columns stretched toward the sky, and massive windows overlooked a shimmering river that cut through the city. Alien diplomats from all over the galaxy were already gathered, their conversations a low hum in the background. But despite the grandeur, it was not the diplomats who caught Alex's attention. Standing by the large windows, looking out over the city with a distant, almost regal air, was Princess Lyra. She stood tall, her posture straight and commanding, wearing a flowing gown that shimmered in the soft light. Her skin had a pale blue, purplish hue, a striking feature that made her stand out even more in a room filled with other aliens of various colors and shapes. But it wasn't just her appearance that held Alex's attention, it was the aura of mystery. Around her, her face was beautiful, but cold, as if she had the world at her feet yet had seen too much of its darker side. She looked out of place among the lively conversations, as though she had something weighing heavily on her heart. "That's Princess Lyra," a fellow diplomat whispered to Alex, noticing where his gaze had fallen. Young, intelligent, and already bearing the weight of her people. "She's the heir to the throne of Xiphos." Alex nodded, but his curiosity was piqued. He had read about the princess before, how she was both revered and isolated. A figurehead of her planet's future who seemed to carry the sorrow of 1,000 expectations as the meeting began. Lyra remained near the windows, her gaze distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. Alex couldn't help but feel a pull to her, an urge to understand what lay behind that cold exterior. But he had a job to do, one that involved negotiating between the alien factions, not chasing after a mysterious princess. The meeting was long and filled with political discussions that Alex could barely follow. He was there to observe, to assist, but his thoughts kept drifting to Lyra. What was it that made her so distant? Why did she seem like she was carrying a burden no one else could see? Finally, the meeting broke up, and diplomats began to filter out. Alex stood up, stretching his legs after the long hours of sitting. As he moved toward the door, he caught sight of Lyra once more. This time, she was not looking out at the city. Instead, she was walking alone toward a small balcony, her footsteps echoing softly in the hall. Something about her caught Alex's attention. Pulling him closer despite his better judgment, hesitated for a moment before deciding to follow. He wasn't sure why, but he had to know more. When he reached the balcony, she didn't seem surprised to see him. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting his with an unreadable expression. "You follow me, Earthling?" Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of something underneath. Was it curiosity or something else? I stammered, not expecting to be caught. I saw you standing there, and I wanted to know more about you, about this place." Lyra's gaze softened for a moment, but the mask she wore quickly returned. "I'm just a princess," she said, her voice a little colder now. Not much to know. But Alex could sense there was more. Something she wasn't saying, something she was keeping hidden. "Maybe," he said slowly, taking a step closer. "But even a princess has a story, right?" Lyra raised an eyebrow, and for the briefest moment Alex thought he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it regret? Fear? It disappeared as quickly as it had come, replaced by her usual calm. "Perhaps," she answered quietly. "But some stories are better left untold." Before Alex could ask more, Lyra turned and walked back into the palace, leaving him standing. On the balcony, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. What had she meant by that? What secret was she hiding? The next few days passed in a blur of diplomatic events. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on the mission at hand, Alex found himself drawn back to Lyra. Each glance she stole in his direction, every fleeting moment when their eyes met, seemed to pull him deeper into her world. He knew she was hiding something. Somehow, he felt that it was only a matter of time before he uncovered the truth. But as the days wore on, Alex had no idea just how much Lyra's secret would change everything for him and for the galaxy. The days following the meeting were filled with countless diplomatic talks, but Alex found it difficult to focus. His mind kept returning to the enigmatic Princess Lyra. Every glance she gave him seemed to pull at his curiosity, and every time their paths crossed, she was always just out of reach, too distant, too closed off. She was like a puzzle, and Alex couldn't help but want to figure it out. It wasn't until an evening banquet that he finally had a chance to speak with her again. The grand hall was filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. But Alex could sense the tension that still lingered in the air. The peace talks weren't going as smoothly as they should. Xiphos was caught in a delicate balance between its rival factions, and every word spoken seemed to inch the planet closer to conflict. But even in the midst of all this, Alex found his eyes constantly drawn back to Lyra, who stood alone by a grand window. Looking out at the stars, she had always seemed untouchable, as though a barrier surrounded her, preventing anyone from getting too close. Tonight, however, she was different. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes that Alex had never noticed before. She wasn't just a princess. She was a woman, burdened by something far greater than politics and alliances, unable to resist. Alex quietly made his way toward her, his heart racing with anticipation. She didn't seem surprised when he approached, though she did glance at him with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders," Alex said, his voice soft but sincere. He wasn't sure why he'd said it. Maybe it was the concern he felt, or perhaps it was the way her sadness seemed to reach out to him. Lyra's lips tightened. For a moment, she didn't respond. Instead, she continued to stare out at the stars, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, but Alex didn't mind. He wasn't in a rush, just needed her to talk, needed her to open up. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a figurehead, nothing more. My people don't care about who I am. They care about what I represent." Her words hit Alex harder than he expected. He could feel the pain behind them, the weariness that came from being trapped in a role she had never chosen. "You don't have to carry the weight alone," he said, his voice gentle. "I know it's not my place, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." Lyra turned to face him then, and for the first time, there was something more in her gaze, something vulnerable, something real. "You don't understand," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "There's more to my story than you know, more than anyone knows." Alex was taken aback by her sudden openness, but he didn't hesitate. "Then tell me. I want to understand." For a long moment, Lyra was silent, as if she were weighing whether or not to trust him. The weight of her decision seemed to hang in the air, and Alex could feel the tension building between them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely audible, as though afraid someone might overhear. "There's a prophecy," she said, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. "One that says I must marry a man chosen by fate. If I don't, my world will fall into chaos." Alex frowned, unsure of what to say. A prophecy. But why is that so hard to accept? Lyra's face grew cold again, and she turned back to the stars. "Because I don't want to marry someone I've never met. I don't even know who this person is, but I have to. It's my duty. It's the only way to ensure my planet doesn't descend into war." Alex's heart went out to her. He could see the pain in her eyes, the frustration of being bound by something she couldn't control. "So you're trapped by this? This prophecy?" Lyra nodded, her eyes distant. "Yes. My life isn't mine to control. I have to fulfill the prophecy, or else everything will fall apart." Alex's mind raced. There had to be another way. He couldn't imagine living a life where every choice was made for him, where fate held all the power. But what could he do? He was just a visitor, a human diplomat caught up in the political web of a foreign world. But then, something in him stirred. He couldn't just stand by and watch as Lyra was forced into a life she didn't want. He had to help her, somehow. He didn't know how yet, but he was certain that the answer was out there. Somewhere. You don't have to let fate control you, Alex said, his voice firm. Maybe you can find a way to break free. Lyra turned to him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to see if he was serious. How? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. What do you know about this prophecy? I don't know anything about prophecies, Alex admitted, but I know this. No. One should have to live a life they didn't choose. You deserve to be free, Lyra. Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Alex saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. But it quickly faded, replaced by the familiar sadness. I wish it were that simple, she whispered. Alex wanted to say more. But before he could, a voice interrupted them. Princess Lyra, a royal advisor, called from across the room. The meeting is about to begin. Lyra turned toward the voice, and just like that, the moment between them was over. I have to go, she said, her voice cold once more. She straightened up, her mask of composure returning. Alex stood there, watching her walk away, his mind spinning with the information she had just shared. There was a way to help her. He was sure of it. But he had no idea how to begin. One thing was clear. Lyra's secret was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that could change the fate of an entire planet. Days passed, and Alex found himself unable to stop thinking about Lyra. Her words about the prophecy haunted him, and he couldn't help but wonder what he could do to help her. It was clear that she was trapped by something much larger than herself, but what if there was a way to change her fate? What if she didn't have to live under the weight of this prophecy that controlled her life? Alex spent the following days in the royal archives, poring over ancient texts and records, searching for any clue that might offer a way to break the prophecy. He had no experience with alien prophecies, but his mind was determined. There had to be something in the vast history of Xiphos that could shed light on how to undo the prophecy's grip on Lyra's life. The archives were quiet and dusty, filled with rows upon rows of books and scrolls. Alex walked slowly between the shelves, scanning the titles for anything that might offer insight. Most of the texts were written in an ancient language that he couldn't understand, but he was determined. With the help of an advanced translation device, he began translating the books one by one. Hours turned into days. The more he read, the more he felt a sense of urgency. There was something hidden in these records, a clue, a warning that could hold the key to unlocking Lyra's future. Finally, after days of searching, Alex found a book that seemed different from the others. It was bound in dark leather, its pages old and fragile. The title was written in a language that Alex couldn't read, but the cover symbol seemed familiar. It matched the markings on the ancient artifact he had seen in the royal palace, the same artifact that Lyra had mentioned in their private conversation. His heart raced as he opened the book carefully, scanning the pages for any mention of the Yokum artifact or the prophecy. The text was difficult to translate, but as Alex read, he began to uncover something that made his pulse quicken. The book spoke of an ancient ritual, one that had been performed by the royal family of Xiphos for generations. It was said that the artifact, which was guarded by the royal bloodline, held the power to ensure the success of the prophecy. However, the text also hinted at a darker truth. The artifact could also be destroyed, and its destruction would break the prophecy entirely. Alex's eyes widened as he read further. The artifact wasn't just a symbol of Fitit, was the source of the prophecy's power. If it were destroyed, Lyra's fate would be changed forever. His mind raced. Could it be that simple? Could the key to saving Lyra lie in the destruction of the very thing that had held her captive her entire life? The answer seemed too simple, but Alex knew he had to act quickly. If he was going to help Lyra, he had to move fast. The political situation on Xiphos was already tense, and if the prophecy's hold on the princess was exposed, it could lead to chaos. But if the artifact was destroyed, it might give Lyra the freedom she desperately needed. Alex couldn't do this alone. He needed to find Lyra and tell her what he had uncovered. But where was she? He left the archives and searched the palace for her. It didn't take long before he found her in the royal gardens, standing alone in front of a beautiful fountain. She was staring down at the water, lost in thought, as if she were waiting for something, waiting for the future that had been decided for her. Alex approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. When she noticed him, she didn't seem surprised. Her eyes met his, and for a moment there was silence between them. "Lyra," Alex said, his voice gentle but firm, "I think I found a way to break the prophecy." Her eyes narrowed, as if she were trying to understand his words. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I found something in the archives," Alex continued. "There's an artifact, a powerful object that's tied to the prophecy. It's what's been controlling your fate all this time. If we destroy it, the prophecy will be broken." Lyra took a step back, her face filled with a mix of disbelief and fear. "You don't understand," she said quickly. "The artifact is too powerful. If it's destroyed, the consequences could be disastrous. I can't risk everything for one chance at freedom." "But Lyra, don't you see?" "Alex," said his voice urgent. "This artifact is the reason you're trapped. It's the key to everything. If you destroy it, you'll finally be free. You won't be forced into a marriage you don't want. You won't have to live a life decided by fate. You'll be able to choose your own future." Lyra's expression faltered for a moment. She seemed torn, as if the idea of breaking free from her predetermined path was both a dream and a nightmare. She had lived her entire life knowing that she had no say in her future. Now Alex was offering her a chance to change everything. But could she take it? "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if everything falls apart? What if the prophecy is true, and without it, Xiphos is doomed?" Alex stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Sometimes fate is not something you're meant to follow. Sometimes you have to create your own path. This is your chance, Lyra. You don't have to carry this burden any longer." For the first time, Alex saw a flicker of hope in Lyra's eyes. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She was starting to believe that freedom might be possible, that she could shape her own future. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "I'll destroy the artifact. I'll take the risk." Alex smiled, relieved that she had finally made the decision. "I'll help you," he promised. "We'll do it together." Lyra nodded, her determination matching his. "Together," she agreed. And with that, they set their sights on the artifact, knowing that their actions would change the fate of an entire world. The decision was made, but the path ahead was anything but easy. Alex and Lyra now shared a goal, but it wasn't enough to just want to break the prophecy. They had to find a way to destroy the artifact without triggering the destructive force. It held. The stakes were high. Xiphos was a planet on the edge, with tensions running high between its different factions. The artifact was the heart of the prophecy, and destroying it could send the entire planet into turmoil. The royal palace was a labyrinth of hallways and secret rooms, but Alex had learned its layout well over the past few weeks. He knew where the artifact was kept, a hidden chamber beneath the palace, guarded by elite soldiers and ancient rituals. No one was allowed near the artifact except for Lyra and the royal council. But with her determination and Alex's resolve, they were prepared to take the risk as they made their way through the palace grounds under the cover of darkness. Lyra seemed more focused than Alex had ever seen her. Her usual calm exterior was gone, replaced by a quiet intensity. The weight of her decision was heavy, but she moved with purpose, her steps sure and steady. She had lived her entire life knowing the prophecy would dictate her fate. For the first time, she had a choice, and though it terrified her, she was ready to take it. They reached the hidden chamber. It was a small, unremarkable door hidden behind a tapestry in one of the palace's lower halls. Lyra glanced at Alex, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "This is it," she whispered. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." Alex nodded, his heart racing. "I'm with you, Lyra. We'll do this together." Lyra took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The chamber inside was dimly lit, with stone walls and a cold, eerie atmosphere. At the far end of the room stood the artifact, It was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. It looked like a large, smooth crystal, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The glow was subtle, but it felt powerful, almost alive, as if the artifact itself held a heartbeat. The moment they stepped into the room, Alex felt a strange pressure in the air, as if the artifact sensed their presence. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her gaze locked on it. Her entire life had been shaped by this object. She had always known it was the key to her future, but now, standing here, she realized how much it had held her captive. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is what has controlled my fate all these years." Alex walked toward her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're doing the right thing. This artifact doesn't get to decide your life anymore." Alida turned to face him, her expression softening. "I've spent my entire life trying to avoid this moment, but now that it's here, I'm ready." With a final glance at the artifact, Lyra stepped forward and knelt beside it. Alex stood by her side, watching as she began to perform the ritual she had been taught her whole life. It was the same ritual the royal family had used for generations, a process that tied the artifact's power to the throne and ensured the prophecy would come true. But Lyra wasn't following the ritual in the same way she had been taught. This time she was breaking it. As she reached out to touch the artifact, the air in the room seemed to hum with energy. Alex could feel it, too, a strange, electric sensation that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Lyra's hand hovered over the crystal, and for a moment, she seemed frozen in place. Her gaze fixed on the artifact. "I have to do this," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Then, with a deep breath, she placed her hand on the crystal. The moment her skin made contact with it, a burst of energy shot through the room. Alex stumbled back, shocked by the sudden surge. The artifact began to glow brighter, the light growing more intense. Lyra's face contorted with effort as she fought to maintain her focus. The energy from the artifact was strong, far stronger than she had anticipated. "Lyra, are you okay?" Alex called out, his voice filled with concern. She didn't answer. Right away. Her hand remained pressed against the artifact, her face pale with concentration. It's too much," she gasped. "The power. It's fighting me." Alex stepped forward, gripping her arm to steady her. "You can do this. You're strong, Lyra. You're not alone." The moment his hand touched her, a pulse of energy shot through both of them. It was like nothing Alex had ever felt before. Overwhelming force that seemed to connect them, as though their fates were intertwined in that very moment. Lyra's eyes flashed with determination. "Together," she whispered. "We can do this together." With renewed strength, Lyra pressed harder against the artifact. The glow intensified, and for a brief moment, Alex thought the chamber itself might collapse under the pressure. The air was thick, the energy around them swirling like a storm. Then, with a final, powerful surge, Lyra pulled her hand away from the crystal. The artifact let out a loud, almost deafening crack, and the glow faded, leaving the room in darkness. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Alex stood frozen, his heart still pounding in his chest. Wasn't sure what had just happened. Had they succeeded? Had they truly broken the prophecy? Lyra slowly opened her eyes. She looked exhausted, her breath coming in shallow gasps, but there was something different in her gaze. A look of relief, a look of freedom. "It's done," she said softly, almost to herself. It's finally done." Alex couldn't help but smile. "You did it. We did it." The artifact, now lifeless, lay in front of them, its power extinguished. Lyra had broken free from the chains that had bound her for so long. She was no longer a pawn in the prophecy. She was free to choose her own future. But as they stood there in the silence, Alex knew that while they had won this battle, the war was far from over. They had destroyed the artifact, but the consequences of their actions were still unknown, and the factions on Xiphos were still watching. They had changed the future, but they would have to face whatever came next together. The chamber fell silent, and the aftermath of their actions weighed heavily on both Lyra and Alex. The artifact lay lifeless on the cold stone floor. Its once radiant glow now extinguished. A sense of relief washed over Lyra, but it was quickly replaced by an unsettling feeling. She had just shattered the core of her planet's future, and with it, the centuries-old prophecy that had bound her life. The truth of what she had done began to sink in. "Is it really over?" Lyra asked, her voice quiet and uncertain as she looked at the broken artifact. "Have we truly changed the fate of Xiphos?" Alex stood beside her, his heart racing as the echoes of their actions filled the room. "I don't know, but I believe in you, Lyra. You did what was necessary. You broke free." But even as Alex spoke, the silence was quickly replaced by the growing sounds of movement outside the chamber. Footsteps echoed down the stone corridors, and the heavy doors to the chamber were suddenly thrown open. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, and Alex's gaze turned sharp as the royal guards rushed in, their eyes wide with alarm. "You've done it now," one of the guards said, his voice shaking with fear. "The prophecy. The artifact. It was the key to everything." Lyra's throat tightened. "I couldn't let it control me anymore. I couldn't live under that weight, knowing my future was decided for me. But the consequences." Another guard began, his voice faltering. "You've undone the balance. There will be chaos." Just as the words left his mouth, the ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet. Alex and Lyra exchanged a quick glance before rushing to the door. The entire palace seemed to be shaking, and through the open windows, they could hear the distant sound of shouting in the streets. "They're coming," Lyra said, her voice tense. "The people, they're reacting to what we've done." Alex grabbed her arm gently, his grip firm but reassuring. "We need to get out of here. It's not safe anymore." The chaos outside the chamber was growing louder. More guards stormed in, their faces grim, but there was no stopping the tide of anger that had begun to ripple through the palace. The royal council, those who had supported the prophecy for so long, would not take kindly to the destruction of the artifact. They would see this as an act of rebellion, a challenge to the very foundation of their rule. Lyra turned to the guard who had spoken earlier. "What's happening? What are they saying out there?" "They've called it a betrayal," the guard said, his voice filled with fear. "The royal council has issued orders to arrest anyone involved. The people are divided, but some are already calling for your head." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "What do we do now?" Alex didn't hesitate. He pulled her toward the exit. "We fight. We stand up for what we've done. Show them that there's more to this world than fate. You have a choice now, Lyra, and we're going to make it count." As they ran through the palace corridors, the noise from outside grew louder. The sound of shouting grew more intense, and soon the hallways were filled with panicked servants and soldiers. All trying to flee the chaos, Lyra felt the weight of the situation settle on her shoulders once again. They had broken the prophecy. Yes, but they had also unleashed something far bigger than they had anticipated. The entire planet was in turmoil. Some would celebrate their actions as a victory for freedom, but many more would see them as a threat to the established order. The royal council would not let this go easily. They reached the palace's hidden passageway, a secret route that led out of the building and into the outer city. It was their only chance to escape before the guards caught up with them. But as they entered the dark corridor, Lyra stopped. Alex looked at her in confusion. "What is it?" he asked. Lyra's face was pale, her eyes wide with determination. "We can't just run away, Alex. We can't leave Xiphos to fall apart." Alex's heart sank as he realized what she was saying. "You want to fight?" She nodded, her grip tightening on his arm. "We can't let the council control everything. We've already broken the prophecy, but we have to show the people that there's a better way. We have to lead them, not run from them." Alex stared at her, torn between the danger and the possibility of change. Lyra was right, though. They couldn't just hide forever. If they were going to change the course of history, they had to stand up and fight for it. "If we do this," Alex said slowly, "we'll be taking on the entire council. The factions will divide even further." Lyra's eyes flashed with determination. "But we'll be fighting for freedom. For the people of Xiphos, they deserve more than this." Alex took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on him, but he knew what needed to be done. "Then let's do it. Together." Two of them stepped into the night, the streets of the city now filled with unrest. As they made their way toward the heart of the rebellion, the people of Xiphos were already starting to gather, their voices echoing through the streets. Some carried banners of defiance, others spoke of hope, but many were angry and confused, unsure of what the future held. Lyra stood tall, her voice ringing out above the crowd. "We've broken the chains that have held us for so long. We are no longer bound by fate. We are free, and together we will rebuild Xiphos." The crowd fell silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling in. Then, slowly, a roar of approval erupted from the people. The rebellion had begun, and there was no turning back. Alex and Lyra stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The future of Xiphos was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she was in control of her own destiny. It was no longer about fulfilling a prophecy. It was about building something new, something they could call their own. The streets of Xiphos were alive with noise, the sounds of a growing rebellion echoing through the air. What had started as a whisper in the palace had turned into a roar of defiance. The city, once a place of order and royal rule, was now a battleground for the future of the planet. Lyra and Alex stood at the heart of it all, surrounded by thousands of people who had come together to support the cause of freedom. The Royal Council, furious at the destruction of the artifact, had declared Lyra a traitor to her own people. But the people of Xiphos had rallied behind her. Some had joined in protest out of loyalty to the princess, while others had been inspired by the idea of breaking free from the prophecy that had dictated their lives for generations. Now, the question was no longer whether they could win it, was how much they were willing to risk to change the future of their world. Alex stood beside Lyra, watching as the crowd surged forward. There was a fire in the air, a sense of unity and hope that seemed to burn through the chaos. Lyra, for the first time, felt like she was truly part of something bigger than herself. No longer the prisoner of her destiny, she was now the leader of a revolution, fighting for a future that was uncertain, but full of possibility. "We can do this," Alex said, his voice steady. "The people are with you, Lyra. They believe in you." Lyra nodded, her gaze focused on the horizon. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the city. It was a new day for Xiphos, a day where its people had the power to choose their own future. But the road ahead was not easy. The royal guard was still loyal to the council, and they were marching toward the city center, determined to crush the rebellion before it could take root. "We don't have much time," Lyra said, her voice low. "The council will stop at nothing to keep their power. We need to act fast." Alex agreed. "We'll have to fight. The people are ready. They've seen the power of the prophecy broken. They know they have a chance now." The two of them moved toward the front lines of the gathering crowd, where the leaders of the rebellion had begun to assemble. There was a sense of unity among them, but also a shared understanding that the coming battle would determine everything. This wasn't just about destroying the artifact. It was about freedom. It was about giving the people of Xiphos the right to choose their own path. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hand to silence the crowd. The noise died down, and all eyes turned to her.
Nice.
For a moment, she felt the weight of the responsibility she had taken on, but she didn't falter. Come this far. There was no turning back now. "This is not just about one person's fate," Lyra began, her voice carrying over the crowd. "This is about all of us. We've been living under the shadow of a prophecy, bound by chains we never chose. Now we are free. The future of Xiphos is in our hands. Together, we can rebuild this world. Together, we can create a future where every voice is heard and every life is valued." A cheer erupted from the crowd, and Lyra felt a surge of energy. The people believed in her. They believed in what she stood for. And together, they could change everything. The sound of approaching footsteps cut through the air, and Lyra turned to see the royal guards marching toward them, weapons drawn and faces grim. They were prepared to stop the rebellion, but Lyra's heart did not waver. She had made her choice, and she would fight for the freedom of her people. "They've come," Alex said, his hand on his blaster. "We need to be ready." Lyra nodded. "We're not going to back down, not now." Two groups faced each other in the streets of the city, the tension thick in the air. The royal guards stood in formation, their eyes cold and determined, while the rebels, led by Lyra, stood firm, their faces filled with resolve. This was the moment that would decide the fate of Xiphos. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying over the silence. "I don't want to fight, but if we have to, we will. We're fighting for the future of this planet. We're fighting for freedom." The head of the royal guards, a tall man in gleaming armor, stepped forward, his eyes locked with Lyra's, and for a moment there was a flicker of recognition. He knew her. He had watched her grow up. The loyalty to the council ran deep. "You're a traitor," the captain spat. "You've turned your back on everything Xiphos stands for." Lyra's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "I'm not a traitor. I'm a leader. I'm fighting for the people of Xiphos. If you want to fight, then fight. But know this, the people will not follow you anymore. They want freedom. They want a future they can shape with their own hands." The captain's gaze hardened, and he gave a sharp command to his troops. The royal guards raised their weapons, ready for battle. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't move. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on the captain. There was no turning back now. The battle for the future of Xiphos was about to begin. The first shot rang out, cutting through the air. It was followed by another, and then another, as both sides clashed in the streets. The sound of weapons firing, the shouts of the rebels, and the clash of metal against metal filled the air. Lyra moved quickly, her eyes scanning the battlefield as she coordinated the rebel forces. Alex fought alongside her, covering her back. As they pushed forward, it wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future. The rebels were outnumbered, but they fought with everything they had. The people of Xiphos were tired of living in fear. They were ready to take control of their own destiny. Hours passed, and the battle raged on, but slowly the tide began to side. The tide began to turn. The royal guards, though well-trained, were losing ground. People were rising up, pushing back against the tyranny that had controlled their world for so long. In the end, it was Lyra who stood victorious, not because of her strength, but because of the strength of the people behind her. The royal guards, outnumbered and exhausted, finally retreated, leaving the streets in the hands of the rebels. As the dust settled, Lyra stood at the front of the crowd, her heart still racing. She had done it. They had done it. Xiphos was free. 4. The first time in her life, Lyra knew that the future was hers to shape. She would build it, not with force or fear, but with hope and the promise of a better tomorrow.